Because the other thing actually is one of the dangers that when crowdsourcing goes wrong in terms of open innovation is when people seemingly start to try and predict what other people are saying, and you get a sort of herding mentality, and originality dies, and that's the real danger actually within the sort of digitally enabled world that we live in. So being able to be original and think differently is just so important. And I can't tell you how bored I get of people coming in to me for a job, and they bring in their little portfolio, little black book with their work in it. And I just want to scream at them and throw them out of the room, and they get really upset because that's what they're ever told is go in with a little black portfolio with ad-like objects inside it. So I think that, as you start thinking about moving away from the institute into the world, is you have to unlearn some of the sort of stuff that credibly you need to learn at this stage. But in order to sort of be original, you're going to have to try and put the portfolio away and think of some different ways of communicating.
Two quick things to that. One of them picking up on John's point, I think about have a presence. So the first one would be, I think, just network furiously. Do not underestimate the power of network to make those, to be able to turn those loose connections into harder connections and create business and collaborative potential out of the network. And then I think linked to that, and because I think it's partly an outcome of networking furiously, is become what I call a T-shaped person. So know what you're really, really, really good at, and be really, really good at that long part of the T. So I guess it's design, but build the top. So you cannot get by without understanding how media works, how technology increasingly works, even how as much how things as obscure as analytics, how they work, how strategy works, and I think that's all linked to a kind of broader requirement. Picking up on a point made a few times this evening about really understanding what the client wants, not just in the brief, but why the brief even exists, what the pressures are. Because once you can speak that language and you can become more than just a craftsperson, I think you then become hugely more valuable and more rounded.
I would just say, and I think the younger generation understands this already much better than we do, but you are your own brand. You are your most important client. So to your point about having a point of view in the world, I think that's the most important thing, is to really create a brand for yourself. Damien Hirst said, I more than anybody know the value of what things are worth. He can put his name on something and it immediately becomes incredibly valuable. But he had to work very hard in creating his brand to get himself there. And I think that's the one piece of advice I would give you guys.
More questions?
Yeah, I have a question for Ben and Adam and then the panel. I was on the VBH Labs blogs while preparing for this, and I saw a case where you would put something on CrowdSPRING, one of you, and as it sort of worked its way up from the big crowd to, oh, I like that, but I'd like to see it refined in this way, you saw people other than the artists who created that individual work responding to your direction. So you actually did start to see a herding or almost a flocking or schooling thing happen with all members of the crowd sort of rising in one direction. I just wonder if you could address how that felt for you, and then also if someone trailblazes a creative branch, but someone else wins the final design, how does compensation work there?
What's that? What do you think? It's mine to say. I remember that vividly. So Adam and I both were involved in that experiment, and there was definitely a moment where we noticed that Adam particularly was making more comments on some of the designs that were being put up, and there was something crazy like 1,500 designs. That almost every time Adam commented, the next 50 designs were almost literally what he commented. Brought back, so it's like he said, oh, less animal reference. There'll be like 0 animal reference to all geometric patterns. There'll be like not so much geometry. So I think the question is a really good one, because for us it raised, I think we wrote about it on the blog at the time, the question around compensating people for, because there were people who were effectively helping to shape things that were coming after them that were not being compensated. So the winner effectively was almost like the culmination of a process, and I'm interested to deal with Michael say this, the culmination of a process where lots of people had been tweaking and nudging and tweaking and nudging and tweaking and nudging. And I'm not saying the winner was purely derivative, but they certainly have benefited from being 4 weeks into the contest. And so that for us, that was one of the outcomes of that exercise for us was, how can you be fair about how this kind of contest works in an open call type setting when everyone can see everything. And I think that made us think twice about whether that was the correct model. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
But what did you come up with in terms of what was fair? I mean,
it's funny you should ask, because I just started a new company that I do believe is fair. With that model, I thought from the perspective of the client, it's fantastic. Obviously, I get all these people working for me, and when I give direction, then everybody follows my direction, and everyone builds on what came last, and I think that's great for the client, obviously. I didn't think it was very fair for the creatives. And so to create a model that is going to be sustainable, both sides need to feel that they're getting something good out of the relationship. So what I've done is I've started a new company, which is, for the time being at least, it's a closed network with a lot of different creatives and clients within the space, and when a need presents itself, we just act as a matchmaker. So what it is basically when someone posts a need, there's a couple of people that will come forward and say, this is how I think I would answer that need, and then the client chooses the one that they think is best, and they go forward from there. And depending on the level of sophistication of the client, we can either back off and say, okay, the match has been made, you guys can now play together, or if we feel there's a need for it, then we'll stay involved and oversee the creative process.
and I think, right up here, we've got a pretty broad range of models here that sort of cover different points of the spectrum, and they are not mutually exclusive, and there's no reason why they can't cohabit in space, and they're going to. You're going to see other models popping up at other points on the spectrum.
Question.
Well, it's called competition. There's nothing new here.
The thing with that, though, is it's only wrong if the people contributing the ideas are feeling exploited.
I'm not sure what you mean, sir. So when you say to take all the ideas, what do you mean?
Well, the client's paying for, you're going to go to a studio and have those ideas from a legal client or a studio. You think all these different ideas coming in, are they compensating all those people for all those different particular ideas? We've always been taught to present 2, 3, 4 directions. And now you're getting 5, 6,000 directions. I think the marginalizing the whole process.
Well, so first of all, I can only speak for our model and our study and our policies. The buyer does not own those ideas. The creators own those ideas. Oh, sure, of course. He raised an objection to the contest model in general. And the statement was that when all those ideas come in, or the implication of the statement, at least as I understood it, was that when those ideas come in, the buyer takes possession of those ideas as they come in, or the client takes possession of those ideas as they come in, which in a traditional client-provider relationship is true. A provider will give X number of ideas, 3, 4, a half a dozen, whatever it is, and the buyer chooses from among those ideas, and the winner is developed, is iterated, revised upon, and developed. So I can speak to our model. So in our model, the entries to a project remain the property of the creator of those entries. They are not the property of the buyer, they're not the property of CrowdSPRING. Our user agreement is very specific about that. The intellectual property remains the property of the creator until the buyer selects one, completes the project with that creator, and a contract is agreed to, and at that point the money changes hands and the property also changes